Welcome to Little Shoots, Deep Roots, where we become faith gardeners, cultivating deep faith in our families, one little habit at a time. I'm your fellow gardener, Christe Thomas, and today I get to introduce you to Shawna Sullivan for our conversation about giving, generosity, and stewardship. We're going to talk about how we can help our kids and ourselves as their parents and grandparents become better stewards of our time, our talents, and our treasure. Welcome, Shawna. You came on recommendation from some of my friends, very high recommendation. So tell us a bit about your family and your ministry.
Yeah. So my husband and I have been married 22 years this month, and we began our married life, even though now we live in Dallas, Texas. We began our married life up in New York City, and we were there for about 13 years. So right away, God was reminding us of who is in control, who orders our steps. And we actually had all of our four children up in the New York area. We had three in New York City. They are now 18, 15, 13, and 10. I can't even believe we're all in double digits now, and I'm realizing I'm about to have all teenagers in the near future. That's a little frightening, but it's sweet. And I just launched my first off to college. She's a freshman up at Penn State, which is across the country. And that has been special and hard, but also it's wonderful when you get to see them launch. As every mom, I wear a lot of hats and juggle a lot of things. So, a fellow homeschool mom, and I also teach an eighth grade class once a week. And then my husband and I felt after our experience in New York City, where we initially moved up there actually to build our resumes and kind of view New York City as a launching pad for a comfortable, successful life. But when we got up there, God changed our hearts and just showed us just what it would mean to actually stay and serve the city instead of use the city for our personal gain. So we decided to say yes and to surrender to staying there as long as he saw good for us. And that was 13 years. We helped plant a church. My husband's in finance. He was a portfolio manager and investor. And so we just began to become passionate for stewardship, which is, hey, we've been given these life experiences. We've been given these beautiful children. We've been given this marriage. We've been given this even apartment, right? And our money and our time. And so how can we use that actually for the good of others and not just for our own personal gain? And that message of stewardship is really what informs kind of my own personal ministry of wanting to speak and write and come alongside others and say, hey, listen, time and money don't have to be an obstacle for you to enjoy the life God's given you. But rather, maybe He's chosen to give you this money and this time for this greater purpose. And so that's what is informing what we do day to day.
Oh, that's really cool. So you said your husband was in finance. Were you also working at the time, like outside the home?
So initially, when we moved up to Manhattan, I was working at a public accounting firm. My background's in accounting. And after starting a family, I decided to stay home and he continued in his role in finance. So
So what I'm hearing is that you guys both know a lot about money.
that's right. It's funny. We both have a master's in accounting. He ended up going more the finance, he's a CFA route. And every day I use accounting skills to manage the home and to now just speak life into, I think I became an accounting major because I saw money as security. Honestly, I saw the path of accounting, a job, a career as security. And over these decades, I've just realized like that the Lord is really, God's the only one that is our secure provider. And so that has been a shift for my heart and my mind.
Wow. So my kids and I have been studying the parables recently. And what you just said in the last 2 minutes, I was like, I just pulled up two parables that connect with what you're talking about. So we have the parable of the rich man who puts his security in his barns full of stuff. And God's like, we're
Yeah,
going to die tomorrow. So what's going to happen with all that anyway? But also
that's
the
right.
parable of the talents where God, the master gives these servants talents, like
Yeah,
talents of gold, like they're piles of gold basically, and he gives them to them to do something with on his behalf.
that's right.
And that's what I kind of heard you talking about too, that's what that stewardship is using what God has given us on his behalf to serve others.
That's right.
So I'm curious, so you have kids and you've kind of run the gamut of childhood now, like you've got all the way to 18. So, what has stewardship and giving look like in your family? Maybe we could talk about what it looked like when they were little and then as they're getting older. I just want to hear all the things.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's important, and you actually already defined stewardship, but even those who don't see the world through a lens of faith still understand the concept of stewardship because it is management of what we've been given. But what's important to note is biblical stewardship is actually partnering with God to use what He's given us to make much of Him, right? And not just build a life of comfort and ease for ourselves. And so having that distinction is really important because we want God and the glory of God to be the end goal of our stewardship. Does that make sense?
Mm.
And so I think that so often we think good stewards is are being people who save or who are frugal and mindful. And yes, we want to be mindful, but God calls us to spend what we've been given. And I think that's one of the shifts for me early on was recognizing that I had actually been given more than I realized to be used. And so, I mean, early on, we have 2-year olds in the city walking around, right? And I think it's just learning how to share. When you have a friend over, what does that look like to invite them into your space and to share a toy? Or you have siblings, and what does that look like to actually love one another? That's when you realize that they're fighting over Legos and you have an opportunity to step in and say, hey, listen, stewardship is actually about ordering our loves, right? Like we love one another and we love our Lego creation. But what does it look like to put those in proper order? Is that we love one another more than we love our things. And so even in those early years as moms, we can speak this gospel-centered truth of stewardship to our kids. I think it also is like, who do you invite to your birthday parties? Is there a child that doesn't usually get invited, or that no one else sees, that you can say, hey, let's include them. That's generosity. That's stewarding the relationships that we have. And then you can think about the money side of stewardship, which is, of course, where our minds naturally go. When our kids have gotten a little older and they understand the concept of money, it's giving them opportunities to use their own money for the good of others. So it's Christmas time. And one of our favorite things that we incorporated a number of years ago is, what if we drew a secret sibling gift, is what we call it. It's the secret sibling. And so you draw the name of one of your siblings, or it can be a member in your family, and then you get to use your $20 to get them a gift, right? And so you see this opportunity of being able to use your money, but also it infuses your children with the joy of giving. And so even in small ways, like having a friend over and sharing, bigger ways, like how can I use my money to bless somebody? Something, we also think about is donating. When we lived in New York City, and I would say even now that we live in the suburbs and we have a house and we have more space, is how can we actually say, you know what, we have more than we need? What if we were to go through and clean out our rooms? We don't need 25 squishmallows. What if we could,
Well,
or maybe you do, maybe you only need 20. Our kids like to convince us, no, but we need 20 of them. Okay, well, let's start small. Let's donate 5 of them. But it's kind of this accounting principle of, when you get something else can go. And so around the
mm,
holidays is a great time to start sorting through what you have that you feel like is excess, and that maybe even though you love it, maybe it could bring joy to someone else, and thinking about donations. And so just little ways like that, we were able to start infusing this language of stewardship in our home.
mm. So I'm guessing that you had some struggles along the way, or did your kids naturally go, yeah, yeah, mom, I love this. I definitely want to invite that kid to my birthday party and get rid of my 25 squishmallows. And
Yeah. As we know, right, when we're living in the flesh, right, there's always the struggle. And honestly, let's be honest, it's a struggle for us. Like we have to acknowledge where like biblical stewardship is a struggle for all of us in wanting to be generous. I think our flesh nature wants to hold on to things. We're fearful of not having enough, or we're in this comparison game, right? Of what others have versus
Yeah.
ourselves. And I'll just say, I mean, yes, it has been a struggle for our kids. It's been a struggle for me. And that's why I think I'm so passionate about saying, hey, let's come together and let's talk about this because there is joy on the other side of it. And so I think as we come alongside our kids and don't just put this as a them problem, like this is a heart problem where we want to hold on instead of give. I think that doing it together has been the key for us as a family.
That's a good point. Yeah, because when they see mom and dad doing it too, that makes a big difference. Like, so do you have any suggestions for ways that you can talk to your kids about your own giving? Because I don't know that I'm necessarily going to say I'm giving this much money to this thing all
Right.
the time. Or there's a lot of those things that the left hand does and the right hand doesn't talk about, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, especially now. I know even for churches and tithing, a lot of it is online giving because you can have
Right.
recurring giving and so many things, even credit card purchases. So much is automated or online that our kids don't naturally see that. I think definitely in the mid to later years of their childhood, you can have those discussions, but a lot comes down to the way that you spend money on their clothes. What
Mm.
how many sports activities? I mean, there's ways that you can address things of like, "Hey, we are investing in you to do a sports activity because we value that and we know that there are good things that come from that. But we're not going to do 5 sports activities." And there's a reason for that. One is we don't want to overspend our time. And we also don't want to overspend our budget in this area. And there's other good things our family wants to do. So there's ways to have conversations around money that don't involve just the dollar amount because it's a holistic view of stewardship we want to portray to our kids. The way we spend our time informs the way we spend our money and vice versa. But I also think for them to be able to participate in ways to give where they feel that dollar amount. So letting them pay at the register for things and say, yeah, that birthday gift was a lot. Mom's going to help you with this much. If you want to contribute a little bit to that, and then I'm going to let you pay for that at the register so that they can see this tangible concept of money. I think, bringing them in a little at a time towards working on a big budget family goal, like something fun that we want to do around the holidays. Things are tighter this year. I'm hearing this over and over. People are feeling just that pinch financially. There's a lot of uncertainty. And so being able to have that conversation together and say, listen, we may not be able to do everything we've done in years past. I want to talk about what would you vote for as like what are the one or two things that you definitely want, those traditions we want to keep this year. And then what are ways that we can be creative to do more things at home or in a budget friendly way? I think having the conversation is
I like that. And I like how you talked about using that same language between we don't just spend our money, we also spend our time. And all those things are kind of wrapped up together. So I imagine that as your kids have grown, you've seen some fruit from having these conversations with them. Can you share some hope for those of us who are still in the middle of it?
yes, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think, the sibling rivalry continues. I wish I could say that goes away in the teenage years, but there's always something, right? They know how to push each other's buttons. What I have seen is the way that they've learned to care for each other. Let's say, even with chores, for example, that each of our kids have a day that they do the dishwasher and they have a day that is their laundry day. And that just helps us keep some order in the home. But again, I have a little bit older children that they've learned it's Thursday. It's not my day, but I know my brother has a test he's doing, or this has been a really hard day, or maybe he had a commitment and he's not here. I'm going to go ahead and do his day and maybe he can do mine another time, right? So I think when you see the way that your children begin to view the needs of others, that's the fruit, right? That we pray for.
Mhm.
To have eyes open to see the needs of others and to see maybe God's given me the time I can actually step in and help. Or this has been happening in our home this week as we look at math homework, which you and I talked about. Some of the fifth grade math, don't remember fully how to do. But I have some olders, in the house that I can say, "Hey," and they're like, "Do you need help?" Like, "Yes, can you help your brother?" So I think when you see them looking for ways they can use their gifts and talents and their time to help one another, that's been super encouraging. Another thing, and honestly, I I could talk about this for a really long time, how generosity breeds gratitude. When we are intentional about saying, "Hey, we have a child that helps us in the kitchen." And this is something you can do from early on. Even when they're 2 and 3, they can help put napkins out on a
Mhm.
table, or they can, I think you had Dorina on one of
Yep.
your episodes, and she is a dear friend and we are passionate about the kitchen. There's so much you can teach your children in the kitchen, whether it's hospitality and serving others, or being a part of the work and then experiencing the joy of others getting to enjoy your recipe and your food and seeing the joy it brings them. So when we sit down at a table, honestly, even though my teenagers are teenagers, they are always like, "Thank you. Thank you for this meal. Thank you for making dinner.
Mhm.
Thank you for this," because they acknowledge what goes behind it. They know the work that goes behind it. And another quick personal story, I will try not to tear up, but my daughter's off at college and I found a handwritten note from her when we got back to Dallas. And in it, she just said, "Thank you for preparing me for this next chapter." Again, it's that gratitude. And this is what was so interesting is she said, "I'll miss our cooking nights, our laughs, plopping down on your bed at the end of the day and giving y'all hugs." And I just want to encourage moms. I think that if we can have that end goal of like, we want to raise kids who recognize one, they have been given amazing gifts and talents to serve others. They also are looking at how we're modeling that in the home, and it's usually not us spending a lot of money on experiences for our kids, but that the gratitude they will have even as they launch is like, "Hey, thanks for making dinner." Like, "Thank you for just being available for me to talk to at the end of the day." And if we can just remember, I think generosity and stewardship, we don't have to overcomplicate it, but that this fruit that we're wanting with our kids is that the generosity will breed gratitude.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I always think that gratitude breeds generosity as well. Like, it's
It's
like I actually just wrote down on my little note card here, it's like one breeds the other,
That's
and
right.
then it just keeps going around. Generosity breeds gratitude, gratitude breeds generosity, and it will continue. I love that.
That's right.
So let's say somebody wants to get into this cycle and they're like, how do I get in here? How do I start? And I'm a big fan of finding something little that you can do and that works for your family.
Yeah.
So, can you give us some examples of little tiny things that you've done, that you're doing now, or you did in the past that help your kids become, let's focus on maybe better stewards of their money?
Yeah,
So,
definitely. So, first, this is going to be a little bit of a backdoor entrance to that, but something, and this is controversial, but we actually don't pay our kids for chores. It's interesting, and I do understand we want our kids to have money that they learn to manage. But what we have found is that we want our kids to recognize that there is certain chores that are done for the flourishing of the family. That's generosity, actually. So, the principle
mhm,
of generosity is that we're giving something, it's a kindness principle, but that it is actually costly to ourselves. And so, again, it may not be in dollar terms, but they're learning that there's some things we can give of without expecting something in return. So, we haven't paid for chores, but what we have done is when there's something extraordinary, like maybe more landscaping, or there's an extra something, a chore that could help the family, even cleaning out a refrigerator. That's not in our normal weekly chore. Then those
mhm.
are the things that we pay for, and so that they can learn the management of their own money. And also, I would say when they get money for Christmas or their birthdays, allowing them the ability to, we know the jar principle, right? We're familiar. You can do 10% to save, 10% to give, and then you have 80% to spend, helping them learn how to manage that. Something really small, honestly, is just don't always say yes. It's a principle of helping your children see wise stewardship modeled by you not always saying yes. And again, that comes back to the heart of the parent. right? But it has to start with us. I think, like I said earlier, showing them what goes into the work that we do in order to put the food on the table, or something really small our kids know is when we go out to eat, we drink water. I know that's like wah wah, but what if we saved getting a drink for some special occasions? Like as a family of six, it is quite expensive to go out to eat. And so our kids know like there's a price tag on that drink. And it's not to steal joy from the meal. It's like, hey, we have the gift of eating out. In order to eat out, we're going to drink water. But then occasionally on those fun, maybe it's a birthday dinner, maybe it's just a Friday night and you're celebrating something as a family, get a drink and it's something so small, or get a juice so small, but yet it means something different to them. And that's where the generosity breeds gratitude, because it isn't something expected every time.
Well, and that kind of kicks back against entitlement too, because when we're always saying yes, and the kids just expect this is the way things are, and I'm entitled to this. But if we say
Yeah.
no,
Right.
so the little habit that you're saying is to say no.
Well, or not right now, right?
Yeah.
Because even, and everyone knows that, right? Just as soon as the Advent season starts, it's like, can I have these shoes? No, not right now, right? Christmas might be
Right.
coming. If it's a birthday month, you can be like, hey, no, you can put this on your birthday list. But we
Mhm.
can apply that, going forward. What I always want to encourage, especially young moms, is that you can take whatever you're already doing. Right. So when you say, what are those small habits that you can make? Take what you're already doing. And it's actually a homeschool principle that I've heard for years and years. And it has been so life giving to me. Is this easy plus one? Do whatever you're already doing and just add the conversation to it, or add the teachable moment to it. So you're already at a grocery store, or maybe you're taking a meal to somebody. Bring your kids along and say, we're going and we're making this meal, or we're going to buy this meal for someone because they just had a baby, or because they're sick and we want to go bless them, or just bring them a coffee. Don't reserve that just for you. Bring your kids along and let them see. And that's something you're already doing, and you're just bringing them in on it.
Mhm.
Yeah. One of the most, I would say, important small habits that we did early on was talk about who God is.
Hmm.
If we want our kids to embrace a life of generosity, we want them to know a generous God. And so, even at the dinner table, be like, how did God provide for you today? Where did you see God help you today? Maybe if you have really younger ones and they're like, what does that mean to provide? Say, how did God help you today? And maybe it's just a small moment, but you're already opening their eyes to see a generous God who abundantly provides. And as you have family devotion time or prayer time, just always saying, God, thank you for providing for us. Thank you that you, at great cost to yourself, sent your son to give us life, because God's a giver. God's the giver of good gifts. So let's let our kids have this big view of an abundant, good provider. And then it helps us say to them, okay, because God's given us so many of these good gifts, how can we help other people now?
Mhm. Well, I love that. I love that, just pointing out who God is as the provider and as a giver. And as we grow to become more like him, that's one of the areas that we can grow in. So I know that you've been working on a resource on this topic for parents, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So it's going to be just a free download for those of you, because I know a lot of times we're listening or we're watching, we're not able to take a lot of notes. And really, this conversation of generosity applies to time and talents, not just money. And so I wanted
Mhm.
to give something tangible for us to have a jumping off point of how can you start these conversations in your home? What does that look like practically with your talents? How can you give of your talents? So this is a resource called Raising Generous Hearts. And basically, what we want to say in a world that says, hey, hold tight to what you have for fear of not having enough, we have the privilege of telling our kids, hey, we can give freely because we have a generous provider. And so I've just broken it down in a practical way. And I've also included some memory verses, just if you want to do something easy, you know, God loves a cheerful giver. It's just something very simple but tangible that gets to the heart of giving.
Yeah, I love that. It's perfect. And I'll make sure I leave the link to it in the show notes. So you don't even have to tell us the link. We'll just pop it right in there. So before we wrap up, just want to ask you one more question. What's one thing that you would say to encourage a parent or a grandparent who maybe wants to help their kids invest in what truly matters, wants to help their kids grow in sharing their time, talents, and treasure, but doesn't really know where to start?
Yeah. I mean, the first starting place is prayer all the time, right?
Mhm.
God, change my heart so I can help shape the hearts in my home. So pray for the Spirit to do a work in your own heart. And generosity is a kindness principle, and kindness is a fruit of the Spirit. So let's not lose sight of that. But then also, I would just say look for these everyday moments to add in the language of generosity, the language of stewardship, of
Yeah.
giving, serving, receiving, helping. All of those that's vocabulary that God's given us to help our kids, and then celebrate it big when you see it. We had a family flourishing jar growing up that anytime I would notice someone sharing something, I would just put a little pom pom in the jar. And when the jar got filled, we would do something to celebrate as a family because that helps the whole family flourish. And when we are generous and we're helping others, we're helping the body of Christ flourish. We're helping one another flourish. So pray, look for those everyday ways to start having that vocabulary at home, and then just celebrate it big when you see it.
And that's perfect. I love that 3-point 3-point system. That could be a sermon. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing your heart, Shawna. Thank you for sharing some of the stories from your family. I think this has been really encouraging, and also kind of is a good push that this is something that is important and helping our children become more like Christ and helping them become more generous people. So thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me.